Bonjour Ethel, et merci pour l'introduction. Bonjour à tous, et je m'excuse, mais je vais changer en anglais parce que mon français c'est pas très bon pour faire une présentation. Thank you, Barthélemy, for the very interesting presentation. I just wanted to highlight one point, which also to illustrate maybe to the audience that to implement all these requirements, the monitoring systems, all the procedures and systems, the certification that you are requiring, all the mapping of your supply chain, it is very resource intensive. It's very difficult, and especially in countries where you might be the only one doing it. So my question, I think, would be more about how, in terms of CIFCA, can you more or less share how long it took to implement all of this, and if it was a very resource-intensive process? Thank you.
Barthélemy, si vous pouvez répondre
oui.
à Larissa.
Oui, merci Larissa. Merci Larissa. Ok. Dans l'implémentation je le fais en français ou non? Dans l'implémentation de ces questions, c'est vrai que nous avions commencé depuis 2007. Ça a pris du temps. Aujourd'hui, nous avions au niveau groupe un pool d'auditeurs qui audite régulièrement, un pool d'auditeurs internes qui audite régulièrement ces plans d'action dans chaque filiale. Et donc, les résultats, les outcomes de chaque audit nous permettent donc de nous améliorer au fur et à mesure et donc prendre en compte toutes les recommandations de chaque audit. C'est vrai que ça n'a pas été aussi facile, mais la première difficulté que nous avions eue, c'est les ressources humaines. C'est des questions qui sont relativement nouvelles et donc toujours c'est pas évident de trouver la ressource nécessaire, la ressource humaine nécessaire qui comprenne la stratégie et l'implémente. Et donc c'est la première difficulté. La seconde difficulté, bien sûr, c'est les moyens. Généralement, c'est des actions qui ont un coût et ces coûts-là pour des services support que sont la gestion de la responsabilité sociétale, ce n'est pas toujours évident de faire passer ces budgets-là. Parce que les budgets normaux, les budgets opérationnels sont beaucoup plus privés concernant ces budgets des services support. Et la troisième difficulté de l'implémentation de ces questions-là, c'est aujourd'hui c'est les différents changements au niveau des standards. Pour des questions qui sont relativement nouvelles, tantôt on parle de RSPO, tantôt on parle de voies de vigilance, tantôt on parle des standards SFI. Et donc, toutes ces questions-là, parfois, on est obligé de consolider toutes ces informations dans un seul tableau et s'assurer que nous prenons véritablement en compte tous les standards pour chaque norme de durabilité. Donc, en gros, c'est un peu toutes ces questions-là qui sont les difficultés de l'implémentation de ces questions. Et ça nous a pris, aujourd'hui, nous sommes pas encore mûrs, mais je veux dire, au bout de 10 ans, on commence maintenant à avoir des résultats beaucoup plus probants sur chaque filiale et donc dans chaque filière.
Merci.
J'espère que j'ai répondu.
Merci Barthélemy. Et je vois qu'il y a encore quelques questions pour vous, mais on reviendra à ça après la présentation de Larissa, car je crois qu'il y aura aussi des questions sur sa présentation à elle et peut-être les questions seront similaires ou se regrouperont. Donc Larissa, vous nous parlez de l'IFC, mais aussi vous avez une expérience de chaîne d'approvisionnement à Levi's, donc vous avez un peu vécu les deux côtés, et le côté investisseur et le côté d'une compagnie qui a une chaîne d'approvisionnement qui doit changer. Donc voilà, partagez avec nous votre perspective. Allez-y.
Okay, Ethel, merci for your points, and I think it's a good transition to my presentation. Your last point on the different standards and the difficulties of private sector to just comply with a variety of certification schemes and standards. And I wanted to also highlight one point, which is the human resources, so the expertise on environmental and social assessment and management in the African region. And I have worked in different regions across, so in Latin America, a lot also in Central Europe and also in Asia. And it is true that in Africa it's very difficult to find the expertise that you require to help companies to implement some of these standards. So if we go to the, I don't know, do I have, can I move the slides? Because I cannot do it now. Ah, no, yes, sorry. So the presentation is in French. It's written in French just for anyone if you want to use it. But I will make the presentation, as I said at the beginning, in English. So the IFC performance standards, it's we cover three main areas, which is the normal, the areas that you all know in terms of sustainable development. So first is environment. The second one is everything related to social aspects. And the third one is related to the workers, so it's mainly labor rights and with a focus on occupational health and safety. Why are international standards important? And this is also linked to Barthélemy's presentation, because he was referring a lot to different certification schemes, like, for example, Bonsuco, like the IFC performance standards. And it is important because it gives some, let's say, a framework to manage environmental and social risks that hopefully is understood by not only investors, but also by, let's say, buyers, bigger buyers, if you are in an export industry. And it also helps to create let's say, a same level, playing level field for companies. Then the second point is that, as Barthélémy was referring to, as a company, I would hope, I would aspire to have the same standards and just focus on let's say, one or two instead of focusing on several. So in the performance standards, we refer a lot to, for example, the ILO conventions. We refer a lot to other mechanisms that could be implemented by companies instead of duplicating. Then one of the things I think I want to highlight is that a lot of the environmental assessment and management has been already very well covered for over 30 or 40 years. So there is a lot of more experience in the environmental area than it is in the social the social area. So when we go on let's say looking at projects, at investments, at companies, most of the gaps are on the social side. I know, and this is referring to Ethel's introduction, that there is also recently a lot of gaps in terms of big plantations, big footprints, mainly related to deforestation. So, but we can talk later on that part. And then I think one of the things, and this is also related to one of Barthélemy's comment, is the company should, what we try to discuss with companies is how they can integrate the environmental and social assessment and management of their risks into their overall operations, instead of saying, I have to comply with this CSR, I want to comply with this other policy or other requirement. try to embed it and make everyone responsible for these risks and impact instead of being something totally isolated from the day-to-day operation of the company. Just briefly about the IFC, I don't know if everyone is familiar. We are part of the World Bank Group. We're one of the organizations, and we are the organization of the World Bank Group that provides financing for the private sector. So we only work with the private sector. We don't work with the public sector. It's our let's say colleagues at the what everyone knows as the World Bank who work with the private sector, public sector. Sorry. Then we are owned. Our shareholders are the countries. So around 184. We have a portfolio of 50 billion, and last year we had more or less an investment of 20 billion. So that's more or less, we invest more or less 20 billion every year, only in developing countries. So we can work with a country. We can work, for example, let's say a French company. We can work with EDF, but with a project in a developing country. So we cannot finance EDF doing projects in developing countries. And then we have, as part of the World Bank Group, we have the latest strategy. The focus of the latest strategy is really on Africa. So, and in Africa, on what we call fragile and conflict states. So we will more and more work on, let's say, in difficult environments where capacity is low, legal frameworks are also very limited, and enforcement is also very complex and limited. So just to discuss about our sustainability framework. So the IFC has a sustainability framework since 2006. It was approved in 2006. We have 3 instruments. The first one is IFC's environmental and social policy. So this policy applies to us, to how IFC does investment. Then we have the second one, which is the IFC performance standards, which are the standards that companies need to apply. And then we have also what we call the access to information policy. So all projects where IFC invests, everything will be disclosed in IFC website. So if you go to Google and you put, for example, I don't know, a project IFC, and then in Africa you can choose maybe Cipra in Côte d'Ivoire, which is a poultry company. You will see all the documentation on environmental and social impact related to that project. So that's related to access to information policy. So later we have, this is the framework. So as I said, the sustainability policy and the disclosure policy applies to us. Those are the requirements that we have to comply with. And then the clients, our clients, comply with the performance standards and with the what we call the environmental and social, the environmental and health and safety guidelines. These requirements are part of our loan agreement, so they are legally binding. So clients need to meet the outcome, need to meet the outcomes of the performance standards and report on these throughout the life cycle of our, let's say, loan. Then just to also highlight that these standards are global standards, and they have been adopted by several of other investment institutions, especially European. So you have all the European development banks are using the IFC performance standards. Then you have the Equator Principles, which also use the performance standards as the main instrument. And it helps, I think, when we have with clients, especially with clients that are growing, that are moving from a local player to a regional player and maybe to a global player, it is an important instrument to have because it helps them also to to gain a brand and to manage better the reputational risk and to manage the environmental and social impacts. We also have the performance standards also help in terms of reduction of resources. So some of them are energy resources, water resources, so it helps also to the bottom line in terms of reducing costs. And it helps also, especially the social aspects related to engagement with stakeholders, helps to reduce any conflict with communities, and also what we call the social license to operate, especially in some of more conflict situations. So here are the performance standards. I will go very briefly to all of them and then maybe leave more time for questions. But we have 8 performance standards, and they are environmental and social standards. They were developed to manage, to first identify and manage environmental and social risks of projects. So it's not only the identified impact, but also any risk that the project might pose to the environment and to communities. Then it also helps in how to manage this risk over a period of time. And they are divided in 2 branches. The first one, the performance standard number 1, which is related to the management system, and then the performance standards 2 to 8 are very theme-specific performance standards. So performance standard number 1, which is evaluation and management of risks and impacts. This is where you will identify your risk. This is umbrella, and that's why we always use this graphic, because it's really the umbrella on how you're going to assess the risk and how you're going to manage. So this is really the basis of the, I don't know how you call it, devoir de vigilance. So the first point you need to do, and this is the next slide, maybe you cannot see it, but it's the identification of risks and impact of your operation. So several times when we go to companies, they have identified some of the risks, the obvious ones. So for example, maybe air emissions, maybe effluents, and all of the time they are related to environmental impacts. But then they have forgotten everything related to social impact. So, okay, if I am a company that has a lot of traffic, what is the impact of the lorries that go from my facility to, let's say, the port in the communities alongside the road? So those things, what is the impact of the company's operations, most of the time are missing in the identification of risks and impacts. So for us, when we discuss with companies, this is the cornerstone. This is the first thing we ask. Have you identified all the impacts and all the risks of your operations? Not only of your footprint, so of your manufacturing operations, let's say, but also your contractors and also your supply chain. And here is where a lot of gaps are in this first very basic step. After that, I think it's a normal ISO system. So you will have programs, then you will have an organization, then you will have monitoring. But there are 3 that you don't include in a normal ISO type management system like ISO 14001 or ISO 9000, which is the 3 last ones on your right. So the first one is stakeholder engagement. So have you identified all the stakeholders that you should be discussing with? The second one, what is your communication with them? Are you communicating with this, and what is the type of communication? What is the type of information you share with the stakeholders? And what is the grievance mechanism? There was a question to Barthélemy before on grievance mechanism. So most of the time, when we engage with companies, this communication with communities or any other stakeholder is still in a very, let's say, infant phase. So it's not very strong. And then also the next one is, how do you report about your environmental and social performance to other stakeholders? So that is performance standard number 1, which as I said, is the umbrella of how you will identify and how will you manage the risk. Then we have the second one, which is also extremely important, which is related to labor and working conditions. And here it is based in the ILO core labor standards. So the basic thing is to have a fair treatment of workers. And workers entail direct workers, so the ones that you employ directly, what normally we call employees, but also workers through contractors, and also workers in your supply chain. So it entails everyone. So for us, even if maybe legally in most of jurisdictions, your responsibility only is with your direct employees, for us, the company still has a responsibility, maybe not legal, but still has responsibility of ensuring that fair labor standards are applied also at the contractor level. Then the basic thing is to comply with national law. You would be surprised how many times companies just don't comply with national law. So, and the problem is in several countries there is a very low enforcement. So enforcement is very weak. But when we go and we tell them, look, you are just not complying with national law, they sometimes are surprised because they sometimes really they don't know. So then one of the 2 points that we also highlight here is protecting vulnerable workers, and these are mainly in the supply chain or through contractors. And then avoidance of child labor and also for forced labor. Then we have the performance standard number 3, which is the normal, let's say, environmental linked performance standard. So this is very straightforward. It is related to prevention of pollution and better resource management. So, as I said, you have 3 main objectives. The first one is just minimizing the impact to humans and to the environment of pollution related to the project. And this is linked to effluent, to solid waste, to air emissions. Then how to better manage your resources, so reducing consumption of water and reducing consumption of energy. And then the third point is just reduction of CO2 linked emissions. Then the environmental performance, we have, I don't know if it's 62 environmental and health and safety guidelines. This is a very useful and technical resource. So it's all in our website, and you have a general one, and then you have industry specific. These are very useful tools, and a lot of our consultants, they use them because they are very well and, let's say, very practical tools for an environmental expert. Then we have the performance analysis number 4, which is sometimes very difficult to understand for clients because this is outside of the fence, let's say, or the footprint of the company. So it is linked to what are the impacts of the company operations to outside communities. So this could be, one example I gave was, for example, transport. If the company increases the traffic in a very narrow, let's say, highway or road, there might be impacts or accidents that could be caused to communities. So there it is something that companies sometimes, it's outside of their fence, so they are not very used to, that's what's happening with my, sorry. They are not very used to dealing with this type of impact. Then another impact where we had let's say, as IFC, a lot of issues have been with security forces. And this has been mainly in Latin America at the moment, in Central America. We had a project which unfortunately went very wrong due to, it was something related to land, and security forces were involved, so people died during a conflict. So now we have much more guidelines on what should we ask, or what should the client be doing if they are going to hire armed security forces, no? Security forces that are armed. So that is another one that is related to this performance standard. So I will go to the next.
Larissa, excusez-moi, je vous coupe 2 minutes. Il faudrait peut-être qu'on laisse un peu de temps pour les questions-réponses à la fin. Est-ce que vous auriez la possibilité, même si je sais que c'est frustrant parce que votre présentation est très intéressante, d'accélérer un tout petit peu pour qu'on puisse poser quelques questions à la fin de votre présentation.
Okay, Aurélie.
Désolée.
Sorry, I will do it faster. This is also the land acquisition process. I think in the last webinar that we had, we discussed about it. So at the end, is to protect the affected people, try to that we don't have forced evictions, and that people that are, if there is resettlement, then they have to be compensated accordingly. That's the overall objective. Well, this is just related to that. So it's really to, at the end, the final concept is whoever is affected needs to be better off than they were before. I think that's any corrective measures should have that as a final outcome. Well, I will run this. So then you have performance standard number 6, which is biodiversity and natural resources. And this we use a lot in agribusiness projects, especially in supply chains, so in soy, beef, palm oil. And at the end, it's to protect and preserve biodiversity. Then how to better manage what we call ecosystem services. And then how to better also manage natural resources. So this is a much more technical performance standard, and it needs a lot of expertise to be able to be implemented. In terms of performance number 7 and 8 are the ones that are least triggered. So here I think number 7 and number 8 would trigger it maybe 5% of our projects. And it's very much related to indigenous peoples, which are regulated by the international law. So we follow ILO convention on this one. So when we have projects that affect indigenous people, then we have to follow what more or less ILO says. We have to identify. We have to be much more careful. We have to be also careful on the timing they have to manage projects. In terms of performance standard 8, it's cultural heritage, and there also, as I said, it's almost never triggered, like 5% the same, and it has to have also certain procedures, but we don't trigger it very often. So here I finish the overview of the performance standards, and Ethel, I give it back to you. Thank you.
Larissa, merci infiniment. C'était très intéressant. Et quelque part, si j'ai pu comprendre, la présentation nous indique que le IFC, ou peut-être devrais-je dire le SFI, avait déjà mis en place énormément d'éléments qu'on trouve maintenant dans la loi de devoir de vigilance. Donc peut-être ma question pour vous, Larissa, avant de venir à la question de Mamadou, je vois une excellente question de Mamadou déjà écrite. Ma question pour vous, Larissa, c'est est-ce que pour vous, au IFC, la loi de devoir de vigilance a changé quelque chose? Est-ce que vous avez vu que vous faites des énormes prêts à des très grosses compagnies qui ont souvent une French connection, n'est-ce pas? Est-ce que cette nouvelle loi affecte les compagnies auxquelles vous donnez des prêts? Est-ce que ça change vos idées à l'intérieur du IFC sur non seulement tous les éléments que vous venez d'éclairer pour nous aujourd'hui, mais aussi sur la transparence des chaînes d'approvisionnement? Est-ce que vous pensez adapter cette idée de la loi de devoir de vigilance sur la transparence dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement dans le IFC? Est-ce que vous voyez que c'est un atout ou un défi pour des compagnies que vous connaissez, avec lesquelles vous travaillez? Et ensuite, on viendra à une question de Mamadou.
It's very, very interesting and very important question. So, in terms of requirements, all the requirements are there under performance standard number 1 in terms of reporting, monitoring, identification, like assessment, identification of risk. So if a company implements it correctly, they should be covered. I think there is a very important difference, and it's the transparency to the public. So because they might be reporting to us, but they might not be reporting externally. And the reality is that in supply chains, especially in agri, I would talk about agri supply chains because it's the one that I work the most. Most of the companies will have, maybe depending, it depends on the commodity, but let's say overall, maybe maximum a 50% of traceability and knowing of their supply chain. And this varies depending on the project. But so you have 50% which you really cannot trace. And it varies. For example, in cocoa, it might be even less. So it might be even only 20%. So are you willing, is a company willing to just say, okay, I can just trace 20% and not an 80, I really don't have a clue from where it's coming. So I think the difference of the law, and for us it's just an added value, is the transparency to the public. So the law is going to allow to be more transparent to, let's say, Danone, from where some of the ingredients are coming from, and Danone will have to report that publicly. And I think they will not be happy to just say, okay, I can just only trace, let's say, cocoa, only 20% of my supply chain, because customers will say, sorry, I want to know 100 or I want to know 80. So there is an enormous difference, but this difference is mainly driven by consumers. I hope I answered your question related to.
Merci Larissa, absolument. Je pense que vous avez fait une distinction très importante entre les protections environnementales et sociales qu'exige le IFC auprès des compagnies qui reçoivent des prêts du IFC et cette novation dans la loi de devoir de vigilance qui est la transparence. Et donc, très intéressante réponse, merci. Et maintenant, je vais fusionner quelque part deux questions. Une question qui nous vient de Mamadou, pour vous Larissa. Mamadou dit « Nous assistons très souvent à des conflits entre les communautés et les compagnies. D'un côté, il s'agit des déplacements des populations pour exploiter les ressources, et de l'autre côté, c'est le problème des communautés qui ne bénéficient pas de ces retombées. Et en plus de cela, la plupart des entreprises n'arrivent pas toujours à aligner leur politique de responsabilité sociale d'entreprise avec les ODD de 2030. Et quelle est la stratégie du IFC par rapport à ça? Et je pense que cette question de Mamadou, donc, je la regroupe aussi avec une question d'Alice, qui dit « Avez-vous des liens avec l'ODD du Global Compact ?» Larissa.
Merci, Ethel. Je ne comprends pas si IFC a une relation avec Global Compact. Je n'ai pas compris la dernière question.
Avec les objectifs de développement durable du Global Compact.
Okay. Okay. No. Oh, yes. So, impact on communities and benefit of communities of projects. And this is a very important point, and sadly, every time we have some projects that require a lot of land, and communities will be displaced, and sometimes not only physically but also economically. It is a problem. It is a problem for us, for IFC, just to see, okay, how can we manage it better? And then it's also an impact on the communities. And I think communities at the beginning, and this is happening in several projects. So it's not only agriculture, but it's also any infrastructure project. Communities always think very short term, and I think it's because of the difficulties they face. So they're very happy with monetary compensation up front. Yeah. So in a lot of projects, and this has been the experience also with a lot of urban projects. So a lot of the things is, okay, I give monetary compensation, I will be fine. The problem is that that money will be spent after 2 or 3 years, and then it's gone. And then people come back and say, okay, now I'm not benefiting from the project. So now we spend a lot of time, at least IFC with some of the clients, a lot of time on what we call the social assessment. So what are other alternatives to what we call livelihood restoration? Because that's the important thing. Can this project, if it happens, can these people really live with the benefits of the project, be it a lease or be it any other? So it is difficult. It's not easy, and we have a lot of projects where, let's say, we failed. Also because the first thing that communities want is jobs. And maybe in agriculture you will have jobs because it's a let's say resource-intensive sector. But if it's a mine can run with 500 people. They don't need more than that, and they need expertise. So the amount of jobs generated would be very limited. So I think it's more about the stakeholder engagement, information about really what the project will provide, and be very clear on what they will lose if they agree to the project. I think that's an important point, because sometimes they are very enthusiastic at the beginning, but then they realize that maybe works will happen only during the construction project phase, and then they will disappear. So I think it is very complex. It's not easy, and every time we have new challenges. So that's related to, I think, the community. But what we do more and more is work also with local consultants who know also the local environment and the local dynamics. Then on point number 2, related to the link to the development goals, yes, we have, and I don't have here the diagram, but we have a diagram on how all the performance standards feed into each of the development impacts on the goals. So there is a link of each of these with the goals. The global compact is just a very broad policy.
Est-ce que je peux interrompre demander quelque chose? Ce diagramme qui répond à la question de Mamadou et d'Alice, est-ce que vous pourriez le rajouter éventuellement à votre présentation qui sera partagée? Parce que je pense que ça serait très intéressant. Merci.
Ok, je vais faire ça parce que le Global Compact, it's a very broad. So then it's, okay, how are you going to implement? These performance standards are really an implementation tool. It gives you really guidelines on, okay, what I will do in a day-to-day. And it varies also because it was written to be able to be applicable for a hotel and to be applicable to a mine. So it is broad, but it gives you a guideline. So the development goals are broad. So, okay, what can the private sector do to implement them? And I think the performance standards are a tool on that. So I will send, how is the link? I will attach the diagram to the presentation.
Merveilleux. Très importante question et très bonne réponse, je crois. Et je viens d'avoir un message d'Aurélie qui nous dit qu'on peut dépasser le temps de 5 minutes, exceptionnellement, car il y a beaucoup de questions que nous voyons ici. Je vais en fait consolider 2 questions qui nous viennent de Barthélémy, qui demande donc à Larissa, comment est-ce que nous pouvons rendre les ressources de la IFC accessibles aux petites et aux moyennes entreprises? Parce que bien sûr, nous savons que les PME sont souvent des acteurs clés dans la chaîne de valeur de multinationales. Donc, comment faire cette répercussion? Et puis aussi, quel type d'appui l'IFC, ou pardon, la SFI peut apporter auprès des banques africaines qui, elles, à leur tour, seraient impliquées plus dans le financement des petites et moyennes entreprises. Donc, je consolide ces deux questions. Et Larissa, je vous demanderai de répondre très brièvement pour donner la place aussi à une dernière question de Juliette et une question que je voudrais vous poser. Merci.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Barthélemy, for the questions because it's very relevant. So just very briefly, before when we decided as a strategy that we were going to work more in Africa and more in fragile and conflict states, we had this issue. The clients are smaller, capacity is smaller, so what do? So now we have a strategy, so we have what we call like advisory. So we will provide advisory like hand-holding to clients because we fully understand that they will not have the capacity to meet our standards in one day. So we will help them with advisory on how to better implement and how faster to implement this project. On your question on SMEs, we are also because a lot of the projects in Africa are smaller, we need to find another mechanism because IFC is not, we were not built to provide money to smaller companies. We were built more for big infrastructure projects. So we are very resource intensive. So we are a nightmare to work with from a company point of view. But we are working on a program for SMEs for Africa, especially in the manufacturing and agricultural sector. It's still not launched, but it's something that we're trying to design to be more flexible, to be faster and more flexible, and also to provide this hand-holding on environmental and social aspects. Thank you.
Merci Larissa. Et pour plonger dans la question de Juliette, une question sur toutes les institutions financières privées, donc bien sûr le IFC, mais d'autres aussi. Pensez-vous que sur le modèle des banques multilatérales de développement, les grosses banques commerciales devraient développer leur propre complaint mechanism accessible à toutes les parties prenantes? Et peut-être je peux élaborer sur la question de Juliette. Est-ce que vous pensez que les normes et les performance standards que vous nous avez montrés dans votre présentation pour le IFC, est-ce que vous pensez qu'il y a une sorte de répercussion, une transférence de vos idées, vos valeurs, vos safeguards vers les banques commerciales? Est-ce que vous voyez cette transition et est-ce que vous pensez qu'elle est nécessaire, comme demande Juliette?
Okay, thank you. I just had a connectivity problem just to answer. No, I completely understand the question, and some of my colleagues at the commercial bank will kill me, but I think that's the trend. In a moment, that would be the trend. I think IFC was the first development financial institution to have a grievance mechanism, and now, for example, all the other European development banks are going to have one. But we were the first one. So I think it's a trend. It's just a matter of time for the commercial banks also. On your second question related to if they are adopting, if commercial banks are adopting our performance standards, and they adopt they formed a group called the Equator banks, with which they have something called the Equator Principles, which are based on the IFC performance standards. And we have meetings, yearly meetings with them just to discuss about harmonization. I think the only difference is that they use it only on project finance. So they don't use it in all their operations. They only use it when they finance a very specific project. And also they use it when they are in syndication with IFC. So then IFC takes the lead and we implement the IFC performance standards. But for them alone, it's only for project finance. It's not for all their operations. I hope I answered Juliette's question.
Merci Larissa. Et en fait, maintenant, je vais commencer à terminer notre webinaire et votre réponse est une transition parfaite, je crois, pour ce que j'allais dire. Vous avez dit « it's a trend », c'est une tendance. Et je crois que ce que nous voyons maintenant avec la nouvelle loi de devoir de vigilance, c'est que cette loi constitue une nouvelle étape dans une tendance qui va encore et toujours plus vers la transparence. Transparence qui, quelque part, récompense les compagnies comme ce à quoi faisait allusion Barthélemy, les compagnies qui sont déjà en avance sur la CLIP, le FPIC, les grievance mechanisms, le monitoring, les audits. Ces compagnies-là sont donc récompensées. Pour elles, c'est une opportunité de se différencier. Mais bien sûr, cette loi accélère la transition pour d'autres compagnies encore qui étaient moins en avance. Et puis nous avons vu chez Larissa que nous parlons non seulement de compagnies qui sont affectées par la loi de devoir de vigilance, mais aussi les investisseurs qui regardent de très près cette loi et pour lesquels cette loi est importante en partie pour leur portfolio. Je crois que nous avons déjà, bien sûr, en Californie antérieurement, une loi qui s'appelle le Transparency in Supply Chain Act. En anglais, on dit TISC, le California TISC Act, la loi de transparence dans la chaîne d'approvisionnement, qui est un peu un précurseur, on peut dire, de cette loi de devoir de vigilance en France, et qui vient se rajouter à la loi que nous avons en Angleterre, le UK Modern Slavery Act, qui demande beaucoup de transparence dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement pour garantir qu'il n'y a pas d'esclavage dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement, et bien d'autres lois encore que nous commençons à voir qui prolifèrent et qui, à travers leur demande de transparence, peuvent récompenser les bonnes pratiques qu'ont élaborées pour nous Larissa et aussi Barthélemy, bonnes pratiques en matière environnementale, que vous avez évoquées, mais aussi bonnes pratiques sociales. Et donc, je crois que nous sommes à un mouvement, nous sommes dans une mouvance, nous sommes à un moment clé dans cette mouvance, où on peut dire que cette loi de devoir de vigilance nous a propulsés vers l'avant et nous a donné, à travers la transparence, un véhicule pour veiller à une meilleure implémentation de ces bonnes pratiques que Barthélemy a élaboré pour nous par rapport à une perspective du secteur privé en Afrique et que Larissa a élaboré pour nous par rapport au IFC qui, bien sûr, est, comme on dit en anglais, a norm enunciator, qui forme les normes pour beaucoup d'autres banques, bien sûr, comme Larissa l'avait dit, d'abord les banques, les institutions financières privées à travers le monde, mais aussi maintenant, nous commençons à voir cette transition vers les banques commerciales. Donc Juliette, merci de nouveau pour cette question qui nous a amené vraiment, je pense, à une clôture très belle et très importante de ce sujet qui nous a tous tellement intéressés et qui interpelle bien sûr énormément de compagnies à travers le monde, y compris en Afrique, qui sont maintenant tenues de devoir déclarer beaucoup plus qu'avant à cause de cette nouvelle loi de devoir de vigilance et de leur chaîne d'approvisionnement qui remonte jusqu'à la France. Je passe la parole à Aurélie. Aurélie, nous avons déjà dépassé de 3 minutes. Merci beaucoup de nous avoir accordé ce temps, mais avec tout l'enthousiasme et toutes les questions ici, c'était une bonne chose de pouvoir ajouter encore quelques petits instants.
Oui, merci beaucoup. C'est vrai qu'on a pour habitude de respecter les horaires, hein, comme le savent les participants assidus de nos programmes, mais c'est vrai que bon, il y avait quand même beaucoup de questions, les présentations étaient très intéressantes, hein, donc merci beaucoup Larissa, merci beaucoup Barthélemy. C'était vraiment un webinaire, comme l'a dit Ethel, passionnant.